Welcome back to another episode of Noble Bodybuilding Talk. We're brought to you by the Kingpay Supplement Company. I'm your host, Carter Krogan, and today we got two special guests sitting at the round table with me. So, Doc, why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm Doc Shepler. I'm the owner of Evolve Health and Wellness. We're a holistic healthcare clinic located in Longmont, Colorado. And I also do some bodybuilding coaching as well as compete myself. I'm a big fan of IFBB, and I'm excited to discuss it here with you today.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And then the next guest, Tanner.Tattered, as I am known publicly. You guys can find me on Instagram at Tanner.Tattered. I started out making social media content, starting off on TikTok, starting basically just by debunking myths around the usage of PEDs and other performance enhancers that certain individuals might use, and how we can bring in health supplements to best equip these athletes to avoid hurting themselves while also achieving the physiques of their dreams. And this is especially true among the younger generation, which is kind of the guys that I'm mostly trying to help. Now I find myself in a position getting invited to podcasts and working with other brands online to generally help these guys out and bring everything to the forefront as far as bodybuilding is concerned, pushing for transparency wherever is possible.
And to be open IFBB Pro someday.
Yeah,
That's
that's a bit ambitious. That one I'll maybe keep under the rug until I start looking like it.
So obviously the big news that dropped today here on Halloween night, Nick
Yeah.
Walker is out. So
Yeah, that's tragic.
How's this with the torn hamstring? That's gonna be something that you can't compete on stage with a torn hamstring.
It didn't stop Chris Bumstead. He did it to his bicep. He's done it to his quad. He did it to his hamstring. However, it's like so close to the show and everything, and with that level of competition, the thing with a tear like that is the longer you wait to get it healed, once that constant tension is released on that muscle, if it tears away from its anchor point, it quickly atrophies. So you have to act really quickly surgically to reattach it before you get all that atrophy.
So
right?
that atrophy would definitely look bad, and it shows up.
Oh yeah, of course. And then it becomes much more permanent and much more severe the longer you wait. So if you try to get through this weekend, even just a week before surgery could be a huge difference long term for him. So he made the right choice backing out. I mean, I know we all wanted to see him compete.
He was my
absolutely-
personal favorite to win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But my concern now is, does this change who could be potentially the top 5 for Mr. Olympia?
Oh, for sure.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think Nick would easily be in the top 3.
Not only
Without
does he
question.
bring a presence to the competitive side, but he also brings a presence for the energy and for the social media side of
Mhm.
it. I know that even in the pre-conference meetings, and him and the Blessing obviously have a great dynamic together. It's a little bit sad to see him not there. I know that there's just going to be that spark that's quite missing.
Yeah.
That Nick Walker flame that he brings to the show just isn't really.
At least you got the hottie fans.
Yeah, that's
They'll bring plenty of that too. Between him and the Brazilian fans, they love talking their shit, which is great.
Yeah.
You know, who doesn't like that?
right.
Well, I mean, Nick to me was starting to represent, as far as the open, like the freakiest of mass monsters that we've ever seen.
His back double bicep is insane. The amount of mass and detail in his hamstrings, I mean, it's just so complete from the back. Yeah, he has a phenomenal physique. I think he definitely would have given Hottie, Derek, Samson, all those guys a big run for their money. He always comes in super lean, super dry. And that's the unfortunate thing is, these things do just happen. And the risk factors for a hamstring tear like this, it's like dehydration, lack of sleep, all the things that go
with
with prep. It's like, unfortunately, it just happens. And it sucks for these guys because they've spent so much time and worked so hard and their fans want to see them. But at the end of the day, it was the right choice for them.
Now, with Nick Walker out, personally, for both of you, who is your favorite to win Mr. Olympia?
Well, I mean, Nick wasn't exactly my first place to begin with, but he was definitely up there in the mix. I've always been, ever since Derek made the switch from 212 to open, and the first time I saw him step on stage and open up his back double, my jaw dropped. And I was just watching the stream. I wasn't even there in person. So to actually have that much presence on stage, of course, Hottie's conditioning is just unbelievable.
Mhm.
And so it was really difficult for Derek to stand up against that. Not that Derek lacked that much, but my push is almost 100% for Derek. I'm more leaning towards the proportions of the shoulder guys where they're massive. But now there's a lot of generation around popularity, like guys like Samson, who are quite a bit taller.
And
Or
Andrew
Rafael
Jack.
Brandau, Andrew Jack, amazing physique.
Yeah.
Although with the critiques from Tyler Mannion about the way that he hits his side try, he won't be able to bring that amazing pose anymore.
Yeah.
At least it won't be judged.
Yeah. Yeah, Derek was my pick too. He's got that really tight waist. His back is among the best that's ever been on stage.
Phenomenal.
And he's built so much more density since he had to stop worrying about the weight cap. I also really like Brandon Curry.
Mhm.
I think he has an incredibly like aesthetic physique. He's really well balanced. I know people criticize him for his legs, but from my point of view, I think they still look great. And yeah, I think it always depends on the people you sit in front of and what direction the IFBB wants to go. Right there, it's always kind of a moving target for them. As objective as that criteria is supposed to be, and they really do strive to make it objective, it really depends on the season that the organization's in and what they're looking for in a representative for their sport.
To play devil's advocate, though, Derek Lunsford, it's his back in particular that stands out over everybody else's when it comes to his legs and his arms and his chest. It's pretty comparable to a lot of other pros on stage. Is it fair to hand someone the Olympia title just because he had one body part that blew everybody else out?
So, I mean, his legs are insane
They're
too.
phenomenal.
Yeah, he has great shape, great density. I mean, he that guy, I can't imagine walking around with, a gait where your feet have to be like 10 feet apart just because your adductors are constantly creating friction. Like he has so much thickness. I saw him doing oh gosh, what's that one what's the name of that one deadlift where you have the bar between your legs? I saw forever ago. It's not, is it a Jefferson deadlift? I think that's what it is.
I don't know.
But he was doing that exercise. I was like, God damn, that guy is just freaking enormous. So, I mean, I agree with you as far as the arms go. His chest has come up quite a bit. His midsection, his taper is unbelievable for a guy that size. And I think, frankly, among the best on stage, maybe Samson or.
But
Yeah.
it's only Samson for his height, I think, proportionate to how short Derek
Yeah.
is. It is unreal.
And
to
the
have.
width of his shoulders and back, it's like it just makes it that much more dramatic. His X frame is the best up
Yeah,
there,
hands
and
down.
I think that's going to be a huge thing for anybody else up there to try to overcome. Hottie, phenomenal conditioning, very well balanced in proportion. He doesn't really have that same quality of shape and structure. So again, it really depends on how lean Derek can get and what the judges are looking for.
Now, obviously, when you're familiar with this yourself, being a coach in bodybuilding, one bad night, one bad meal, too much water can easily throw someone out of shape when they step on stage. So, say something happens to Derek and he doesn't look as good as we expected, or someone where their body can't bring that same conditioning that he had from last year. For both of you, who's your dark horse to potentially steal his crown?
So I'd also contextualize this by saying that Derek has been a very, very consistent competitor. I mean, him working with Hani Rainbow and Hani has done him right almost every single time. 212 was a division that was dominated by him, so much so to the point where he just said, you know what, I think I'll just stroll into open today. And he has that liberty. So the chance that he does come in or does mess something up, very unlikely. He knows his body very well. But if it does happen, I think, and you and I talked about this a second before the podcast, but Hunter Labrada brought an amazing package to the Tampa Pro.
Absolutely.
And I would love to see him step up and creep up into the top four as he's done before. He's placed quite that high. And I think he is on that caliber as a pro, but it's a matter of what is the landscape looking like. I mean, if Samson comes in and is blowing everyone else's minds, he's top three, hands down. On the other hand, I mean, Hunter Labrada is he's in the mix, but I don't know if he has that wow factor where he can really smoke everybody else. That's how I'm looking at it.
And he's battling that pec tear too, and it's like that might not be a big deal at smaller shows, but when you're on the Olympia stage, all those little things
They add up. Yeah.
Yeah, and with respect to Samson, I know a lot of people have him as a dark horse. He had an update the other day, and who knows what the timing was of that, how many weeks out it was.
Right.
But supposedly it was recent, and frankly, I just don't see his conditioning coming anywhere close to Hottie. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for him to overcome up on stage. I guess mine would probably be Brandon. He's won it before. And who knows, it could just be his day. I think he has a phenomenal aesthetic. He's a great representative of the sport. He did a great job as a 2019 Mr. Olympia. So I wouldn't be terribly shocked if he was able to pull it off the second time.
There's a couple of things that stick out with me as far as dark horse, which coming back to Hunter Labrada, Tanner brought him up. Hunter's been competing for a long time. He has the name, he has a follower base, and a lot of times what the IFBB wants to do is that they want to have someone win the Mr. Olympia who really is a fan favorite in a lot of ways. With Hunter, he finally is starting to bring that dry, fantastic physique that we all know that he was possible of, but he always came in just a little bit too watery. So for the IFBB, if they give it to Labrada and he brings a fantastic conditioning, it sends a message to competitors that, hey, this is not necessarily all about just the most amount of mass you possibly pack on. It's also kind of the mass with class thing as it goes. So I'm very excited for that. Obviously, something that's been a big conversation recently is the IFBB increasing weight caps now for Classic. Chris Bumstead, of course, has been Mr. 4P, won 4 times in a row, looking fantastic. He has that fan base among both the casuals and the serious people of bodybuilding. 6'1", that height group got the least amount of the weight cap increases. Does the IFBB not want him to win anymore? Do they want to see someone else give him a run for his money?
I think that's really it. They just want to make things more competitive, and in a sense, they have to handicap the taller guys, not just Chris, but across the board, because there's so much more imposing with the weight cap put on the smaller guys. You need to give them a way to stand out on stage, and they're just historically being overshadowed by these taller competitors. So I think that's really their intent, is to just try to create a more competitive landscape across the board.
You'll see this on social media a lot. I mean, there's a variety of commenters, some of which may be low IQ, but others not so bad. You'll see conversations about, hate comments like, they just, all the tall guys, it's not fair to the short guys, or vice versa, where it's like, nah, these short guys shouldn't even be in classic physique. They don't fit the class. But the IFBB is very, very in tune with what the division needs, and they are trying to push it in a direction that is healthiest for the longevity of the sport. And what they're doing here is just another step in that direction, where they understand there is a historic pattern of over and over and over again. We're seeing a lot of these taller athletes massively overshadowing the physiques of a lot of the shorter guys. And although it's not fair to compare Terrence Ruffin of last year's Olympia, Terrence Ruffin of the Olympias before had an amazing and competitive physique. But even putting him next to Chris Bumstead, you just cannot compete until there's a certain amount of mass. Then maybe he gets more into the mix. Then maybe there's a little bit more of an open-ended question. Could Terrence dethrone him? And that becomes a unanimous thing across the board. Can a shorter athlete, who maybe does have the flow, does have the X taper, with enough mass to have that presence and have that impact, really start to find success in the classic division?
Yeah.
That's what I think we got to look out for.
Yeah, I think Terrence is looking absolutely incredible. He has a beautiful physique. He has a great stage presence. I mean, Ramon is insane. is looking crazy.
Yeah.
Mike the Badass, I forget his last name, but I mean, wow, his shoulder to hip ratio is just out of this world. It doesn't even make sense. So you have so many really high quality competitors coming in, and Chris is battling the bicep, the quad, the hamstring, and it's like, okay, at what point does his incredible frame and structure and presence kind of get outclassed by some other variables that other competitors bring to the stage that he just can't? And I think it's good that they increase the weight cap for the shorter guys. It's just going to make everything that much more exciting.
Because when they brought up that weight cap, the first person who came into my mind, Terrence Ruffin.
Yeah, of course.
That beautiful aesthetic physique that just shines fantastically on stage in all of his posing.
Yeah, it's amazing. His waist control, the way he displays himself, it's top notch. It's the best in the sport, not even reserved to classic.
Absolutely.
He's amazing.
Another big conversation coming into men's physique. Jeremy Buendia, Denver native, is back, and his last Mr. Olympia win was 2017. The last time he competed was 2018. Multiple injuries that he's had to rehab over time. Does he have the ability, after that much time off, to dethrone Aaron Banks, who won last year? Where could he place?
I didn't really grow up in the era where Buendia was competing so much, so I'm a bit detached from his heyday. So I'm biased towards the current competitors now. The guys that obviously stand out and who's been a hot topic lately was Chiron, who had beat Aaron Banks at a recent show. Aaron didn't have to compete. He already had the Olympia qualification, but he wanted to because Those of you who know him on social media, he does have a little bit of an ego to him, does like to show off a little bit, and rightfully so. He is the Mr. O. But for him to go into a competition and then lose to another competitor is pretty significant. And that's also to a competitor who last minute decided to do the show and won it. So that is someone who I would put my hat in the ring for. As far as Buendia, I don't know if he can stack up against the skill and the talent of the guys that are currently in the physique division.
Yeah, I mean, he has an impossibly small waist, really broad shoulders, his pec, arm development, calves, like everything looks fantastic. He has a little pec tear, but it doesn't really seem to impact his overall look too much. I mean, I think it would be crazy to discount a former Mr. Olympia,
Very true.
right? Because I mean, he's shown that he's won it in the past, but let's also realize like men's physique has changed a lot over the course of the past few years.
Their size in
Right?
general
Their
has
size-
exploded.
Their size has exploded. Have they enacted the weight caps on men's physique?
Yes, they
yet?
have.
I think they have.
They brought down the weight.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, there are a lot of factors to consider there. And when you see some of the people, some of the competitors who have won other pro shows, I think the whole class may be headed in a different direction. So in that sense, it's really anybody's game, and probably best to go with like Chiron, because that's already the direction the judge panel has decided to go in. So people who present more similarly to him probably could be more successful.
And of course, men's physique is all about the board shorts and the quarter turn poses and the back poses. It's been announced that for next year, we're going to have shorter board shorts and they're going to be a little bit tighter. So our legs going to be a factor in this year's Olympia, even before that rule change.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's at least good for the physique division where they'll get a little less slack from the other divisions saying like, oh, you guys don't train your legs. But
Yeah, and
they do.
Buendia has great legs.
Fantastic legs.
Yeah, so he's definitely not slacking in that department.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
With all these storylines within the Open Mr. Olympia classic physique, and now men's physique as well with what's happened this year, is 212 really getting overshadowed in the situation?
Yeah, it's kind of an afterthought at this point. You've had so many major competitors for 212 make the jump to open.
A lot.
You know, whether or not that division is going to be obsolete soon, I don't know. That remains to be seen. It's really anybody's guess. But from a business perspective, if it's not drawing spectators and attention, then they'd probably be better served reallocating prize money and all the budget that's dedicated towards 212 and promoting that division somewhere else. So I wouldn't be shocked if they eliminated that division down the line. But at the same time, some of our favorite guys, John Jewett, he made a big jump this past year. They came up through the 212 division. Obviously, Lunsford, I wasn't Hottie was 212, right? So you're seeing a huge trend here where, you know, these guys, they don't even necessarily need to compete in that division. They could just make the jump. So it's really tough to say.
We do have a storyline though, which is Sean Clarita has won a few times now. Keon Pearson is the big talk with him taking the Texas Pro this year. Can he come from a 6th place finish from last year and dethrone Clarita after he's won so many times?
Honestly, I mean, I don't see it happening. And I'll also comment on the landscape of 212 right now. The main thing with every division is that there needs to be a star in it that captivates the entire bodybuilding world. And we've seen this, obviously, Exhibit A with Chris Bumstead. Everyone, it's all eyes on Chris. Whatever Chris does, what's the news with Chris? Is there an injury with Chris? All of that, all eyes on him. With an open bodybuilding, then there's a number of stars. There's a number of guys that have a lot of presence and draw a lot of attention to them. Even just Nick Walker with his hamstring tear, that is breaking headline news for the world of bodybuilding. You want someone in that division to have that same presence. And in 212, Clarita is an amazing bodybuilder. He is established beyond all belief, but he's missing something. And he doesn't quite have that star factor that the other guys do. This is kind of the same case with Keon, where he's a little bit of a drama piece that will come up in social media a lot. All of the Instagram bodybuilding pages will talk about him. Bodybuilders Without Borders, you know, all the other accounts. And the thing with Keon is just Clarita is unbeatable. It's so impossible when you're in a division where these shorter physiques are appreciated, and Clarita has made the attempt to go into open and try to do his best. It's the same issue with short versus tall and classic, where no matter what Clarita does, he's always going to be overshadowed by the bigger guys. But then within 212, which is within his realm of he could conquer this physique, he could conquer that physique, then he has the reign to explode. And I think they are letting him have it. So
He
I
definitely brings some
Keon,
insane conditioning.
it's mind blowing.
And
Yeah.
and he's so full and everything. I think structurally, Keon blows him out of the water.
If Keon can come in,
Yeah, he
100%.
has to bring it in a way that he never has
Yeah.
before. Honestly, Keon has one of my favorite physiques of all time.
Absolutely.
He really does. Like his rib cage shape, like even that is just unbelievable. All of his insertions look fantastic. Really, the only flaw that I can see in him is the diastasis in his midsection. That's it. Apart from that, he's incredibly complete and really aesthetic. I think he could dethrone Sean, but it would take a Herculean effort to do that.
And going back to Tanner's point about 212 really needing a superstar, the last time we've really seen one would be Flex Lewis,
Right.
who's not been out of the game for a long time. So they're definitely past due. So if Keon Pearson could come in and sweep the show,
Mhm.
and he could capitalize on that, then we might actually have a different topic to discuss for next year.
And
Yeah.
Flex's legacy continues even on. Like he has the Dragon's Lair podcast now and everything too.
Mhm.
So you need someone who has so much presence within their division that even after they're done competing, everyone still wants to follow them. Even Ian Valier, who was, never really top Olympia candidate, obviously did amazing, but everyone follows him. Everyone like knows what's up with Ian. Maybe a little bit of connection with Chris, but something like that. You need to bring that magic factor. And we just haven't quite seen that either in Keon's personality or from what Clarita's brought to the game. Maybe it's he's aging and not as attached to his social media audience.
That's possible. And obviously, we're all really excited to see the show. It's going to be fantastic competition across all divisions. Obviously, Tanner, you're definitely a little bit of considered the master of the anabolic side
Oh, sure.
on social media.
Yeah.
What do you think it is that a lot of these guys are doing to really prepare for a show like this, from the dieting to the drugs even?
Yeah. With the drugs being my specialty, I can talk and honestly say that it's going to vary a lot from person to person. And so if you are asking these questions coming from a standpoint of what are they doing, maybe I can copy that and look like them. I'll be honest with you, you're coming at it from the completely different standpoint. Like you need to realize that all of the drugs are like cherries on top. Once you have a diet like them and a training like them, and you've gotten the size like them, then maybe you can earn the kinds of things that they're putting in their bodies. But when it comes to contest prep and things like the Olympia, this is a good topic to bring up in relation to Nick Walker's injury. A lot of people make assumptions whenever someone pulls out of a show prematurely that it's a health issue or it's like they push their drugs too hard. Like these guys are killing themselves to try and be pros and whatever. And it's absolutely true that they take a lot of risks put on the muscle mass that they do have. But even in Nick's case, it was just a human injury. So I think it's a little bit unfair for the social media world to attack guys, assuming that it's drugs, assuming that the drugs are the problem, when in reality, stuff just happens, man. Like hamstrings tear, whatever. People were saying that even Chris's bicep injury was a bad injection or like a bad site enhancement or something. But in reality, he just tore it and had to have it reattached, most likely.
It really gets overshadowed by the fact that it's not appreciated enough what these competitors do to put themselves through to get ready for a show, from the extreme diets to the drug use to the sleepless nights. And Doc, you coach people on a regular basis who step on stage. From a mental game perspective, how are you making sure that these athletes are in line and stick with their plan to be show ready?
Yeah, that's probably one of the most challenging parts of coaching somebody, especially, at the amateur level. There isn't that same gravity, right? The stakes aren't nearly as high, other than getting up on stage, not being ready, and not placing as well as you'd like, and maybe letting down people who come to watch you, right? So the transparency piece between athlete and coach is so critical, right? If you're cheating on your diet, I've done it. Like, I just want to know, right? There's no judgment on my part, but, trying to cope with cravings, making sure we're selecting satiating foods to help offset the extreme deficit you need to put your body in. And that deficit's relative to the individual, of course, but making sure that we're doing everything that we can to set them up for success and mitigate cravings and relapses, and then, troubleshooting and doing damage control when that does happen. Doesn't really seem to be as much of an issue at the pro level. But I think for amateur competitors, it's a lot tougher because, you know, we have other things going on. We have full-time jobs outside of our training and preparing. We feel drained, then life happens, right? And depending on your relationship with food or the gym or whatever, your spouse, all those things can negatively impact your ability to recover, um, as well as your response to the diet and your ability to adhere to it.
So for people at home who may not understand what it's like to get ready for a show
Mhm.
and be that lean and compete that hard, and this is a question for both of you, combined with extremely low calories
Mhm.
and the drug use, how much are these guys really suffering for the time that they prepare?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at their faces, you can tell how much they're suffering, right?
They look like a skeleton.
Yeah.
They're probably suffering.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're not in a good place. Anybody who would say it's healthy to look that way, I think is just being silly, you know. And
Bodybuilding's not about health. No.
no, I mean, of course, you want to mitigate risks and things like that, and you can do things to control for those risks. But at the end of the day, especially when you start to get really dry, as was the case with Nick Walker, if you're, you know, really trying to tank your estrogen or you're employing diuretics really early to give your body time to dehydrate, then the risk of tendinous injury, electrolyte imbalances that can impact your cardiac health, a lot of different things can happen, especially not just leading up to the show, but then the rebound phase afterwards.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it takes really careful expert management of those variables.
So it obviously is a known factor that competitors do have to withdraw from shows due to health issues because of what they're subjecting their body with. Was that usually caused by the primary reasons, and how can that be prevented for the health and safety of competitors?
So there's a variety of reasons. I mean, you can take any example where a bodybuilder probably had to pull out of a show. And honestly, the fact that they do pull out is a really good sign.
Mhm.
There's a lot of competitors that you probably had no idea that they're having extreme health issues because they showed up on stage, they had a great showing, and you're like, wow, he looked really great in that show. But maybe like something behind his eyes, it looked like he was really struggling a little bit. Even, I mean, one of the most notorious cases of all time is Dallas and Carver collapsing on stage. There is a situation there where if a competitor is really, really carefully monitoring their health, knowing exactly what's going on, there would have been red flags going up all over the place. Hey, man, don't step on stage. This happens a lot of the time. So, a couple of things that would happen most commonly, just like what you've been talking about, is diuretic use. If a competitor is maybe an amateur or irresponsibly using diuretics, or they are under the supervision of a coach who is irresponsibly giving a competitor diuretics who has no business using them,
Yeah.
then there is a dramatic risk of injury there. Can end you up in the hospital pretty dang easy, or it's going to end you up in a tombstone. So that's a notorious one that a lot of competitors will think in their brains, especially as prep brain starts to hit you. Oh, I'm not lean enough. I'm not going to be able to succeed on stage. I need more diuretics. I look watery. And then you go down this dangerous rabbit hole of hurting yourself with more drugs, thinking it's going to make you look better. And in reality, you talk to some of the guys that competed in the 90s or even before when diuretics weren't even as popular, and they said, no, you take the diuretic, you lose all the fullness. You just look like garbage on stage. There's a time and a place if it is right, and there's a lot of moderation leverage when it comes to the kinds of performance enhancers that these guys are bringing in close to stage day.
Yeah. And even that's like the greatest acute risk in bodybuilding is diuretic use.
Yep.
That is the most dangerous component of it. Everybody talks about anabolics is, you know, that's more of a long-term.
That's slow
health
burn.
risk.
Yeah.
That's a slow burn. But diuretics, their misuse will kill you on the spot. Like if you use furosemide and then, you know, have a ton of potassium after the show, that'll kill you. You're done.
Immediate heart attack.
Yeah. So, and those are things, especially at the amateur level, where they're not being overseen by quality coaches, because there are plenty of people out there who have no idea what they're doing. I've heard some absolute horror stories. You know, they can really cause serious injury or even death. And unfortunately, it does happen. And because these athletes, they're just amateurs, it doesn't get nearly the publicity.
Yeah.
So that's why it's really important for, you know, people considering getting into bodybuilding. You have to do your due diligence, interview the people that you may want to work with, and make sure that they know what they're talking about and they're a good fit for you. And of course, that they have your health and well-being as paramount when trying to get you ready for a competition.
Absolutely. When it comes to this year, what I find really unique is that this is the third time that the Olympia is being held in Orlando, Florida. This is after about 2 decades straight of being in Las Vegas. Does the IFBB want to target a new audience, or are they trying to grow the fan base? Is it a smart move to stay somewhere like Florida for their show?
I mean, have you guys been to Florida before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you think the atmosphere there compares to Vegas?
Extremely different.
Yeah.
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 But in a way, they're both kind of conducive to bodybuilding.
Mhm.
Yes.
Vegas has a love for the freaks, and then something about Florida is like the maybe self-improvement spiral that a lot of people go on there. Bodybuilding feels great there, and the first time I ever saw Derek Lunsford in person was actually he was training at MI40 in Tampa, and it was there seeing someone like a professional train, getting an idea of wow, the air here just feels anabolic in a weird way, and it attracts a lot of bodybuilders for that reason, and it becomes a little bit of a hotspot. You start to see something similar with Vegas. We know Flex Lewis is out there. We know Dennis Wolf is out there. A lot of the older guys are out there too. A couple of the main pros, maybe Charles Griffin is out there too. Not sure.
Nick Walker used to be out there.
Yeah. Nick Walker. I think he's there now. He just moved there with Maria, his girl. So yeah, you start to see these hub spots build up, and I wonder the direction. You know, there might be a financial incentive in one way or another. I know Florida's got a lot of financial incentives there, and Vegas is similar. But to be honest, as long as we're having the Olympia, it's great. Maybe something we can talk about later, but the fact that international visas are getting declined a lot for a lot of competitors.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that might be a good direction to go in the future because certainly the US has a huge fan base for bodybuilding. It's certainly growing in what really is a niche sport.
Yeah.
And so they have to do their due diligence and make sure that the local demographic is going to want to attend the show, right? Because ticket sales are huge, and as are pay-per-view sales. I think it would be foolish from a business perspective not to consider going to Kuwait, some of these other really big places that are huge fan bases, and yeah, or Brazil, for instance. Like there are plenty of places internationally where the IFBB could do really well.
Thailand even.
Yeah, absolutely. Across India, has a tremendous fan base for bodybuilding and one of the densest populations for a country.
Yep.
So again, it's like it's in the IFBB's best interest to consider going abroad and internationally, not just for the visa issue, but also because you're going to tap into a broader demographic and bring more people into the sport.
The culture is so different when you go abroad too. I've heard bodybuilders talk about this because I've never seen it firsthand, but they talk about how the culture of bodybuilding back like in the 70s and 80s is you would walk through the streets and people would like crowds would form. And it was mind-boggling to see people of this size, and it was so appreciated. There was definitely a phase like, you know, early 2000s where it was weird to be a bodybuilder. It was really strange and obscure. It's like, oh, like why do you lift weights so much, meathead? And then in other countries, it has that same essence to it that guys like around the golden era and Arnold where it was so appreciated. And I think they gravitate towards that. It's probably why a lot of guys choose to live and stay out in Dubai is because they fall in love with it because those nations love them so much and they appreciate it so much. It's a different world.
And it's much less restrictive.
Big time.
Yeah, which is so important.
As far as Florida goes, at least in this current moment, I think it's a smart move for a few reasons. Number one, we all understand that Florida is a very pro business place.
Yeah,
that's a positive. The second thing too is Miami is a big travel spot, not only just in the U.S. but across the world. It's easy for bodybuilders who are coming overseas to get an easy international flight there. Probably doesn't cost as much money to go to some of these more niche places. And third of all, is Florida's culture is definitely more towards the pro bodybuilding side. 10 months out of the year, you can go lay out on the beach, go tan. People want to look good. They want to go out on the boat, and bodybuilding kind of fits into that of taking that to the extreme.
Yeah.
So it's a good fan base to start with, and what I would like to see really is a lot more Olympia qualifier shows by the IFBB around the world, and simply just observing from afar is like, okay, which places are popping off where, which is drawing the most crowds, and then we can look at possibly taking the Olympia international. But for right now, I think Orlando's fantastic.
Yeah, I think so too.
So look forward to the show. Doc, Tanner, where can people find you?
So I pretty much live at Evolve Health and Wellness. We're 1715 Iron Horse Drive, suite number 145 here in Longmont, Colorado. And if I'm not there, probably at the train station. I'm the new training director over there. So I'm helping manage their training program and helping out their members and all that. So yeah, you can find me at train station or Evolve.
I will not be giving out my address. I will be giving out my Instagram. You guys can find me at Tanner.Tattered. That is both on YouTube and on Instagram. I do live here in Colorado, but don't go hunting and looking for me. I also post on TikTok, but unfortunately, TikTok is not very pro bodybuilding PED use. So,
Let's be real, it's the foot pics that did it.
well, there were none of those, so don't go looking for that. My accounts regularly get banned, but if you check my Instagram, I have this funny little document called an FAQ. There's some full guides in there onto some compounds if you are interested in them. And you can find links to all of my valid and currently alive social media accounts in there because it will oscillate. I'll warn you of that.
I'm your host, Carter Krogan. You can find me on Instagram at the Carter Krogan. This has been another episode of Noble Bodybuilding Talk. See you all next time.